It's been almost 1 year now since COVID-19 was confirmed here in San Diego County. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Steve Price.
And I'm Carrie Lane. Carlo and Barbara Lee are off. It has been a year that's changed many of our lives and certainly the way we live them. News
8's Brandon Lewis has a look back at the first confirmed county case and what we've faced from then on.
This San Diego County resident is hospitalized and doing well.
A year ago, county officials announced a woman in her 50s was the first locally documented coronavirus case. She had recently returned from abroad, but it confirmed what they feared was on the horizon: inevitable community spread.
The panic is real, definitely.
With lockdowns coming, people began buying up supplies.
This is severely crazy.
Lines of cars stretched for blocks near stores. Food flew off shelves and toilet paper became a hot commodity.
There's a line just to get in. I've never seen that happen before. There's no bread, nothing. Everybody's going insane.
Then came the closures, starting with a stay-at-home order March 19th that closed almost everything deemed non-essential.
Beaches, boardwalks, and parks are closed. This includes the water.
Schools followed 2 weeks later.
We're not just shifting to online, we're shifting to online during a pandemic.
Face masks became part of the new normal. The closures would continue for 6 weeks as protesters demanded they reopen sooner.
Certainly there was a necessary time for this, but I think the majority of Americans believe that time has passed.
Restrictions were slowly lifted and things looked like they were getting back to normal. Then some places took it too far.
We simply cannot tolerate such blatant and intentional violations of the public health order.
A month later, cases started spiking, prompting another round of closures.
It's kind of like a roller coaster right now. You know, the rules come out the next day, we follow those rules, and then they change them again.
This time, cases packed hospitals and ICUs. It took weeks for numbers to come down in time for some schools to reopen in the fall.
It's a lot different when it's virtual than in person, so I'm really excited to see all my students.
We then seesawed between red and purple tier for 2 months before turning toward the worst, just before a Thanksgiving that sent us to the darkest days of the pandemic. Cases rocketed, ICUs were overwhelmed, and staff were pushed to their breaking point.
I would say we're getting close to a crisis.
More than 155,000 San Diegans tested positive and 1,500 died in December and January as the first doses of the vaccine arrived. But the rollout was slow to start. Vaccine superstations were built across the county, first for healthcare workers and then for the most vulnerable. Case counts are going down, but access to vaccines for everyone is still elusive, and fears of new variants may keep us on edge for the year ahead.
Brandon Lewis, News 8.
A countywide vaccine shortage is forcing some vaccine sites to temporarily shut down and the cancellation of appointments.
News 8 has heard from several people experiencing this problem, including a couple in their late 70s who had their appointment canceled 4 different times. News 8 Shannon Handy of our vaccine team has an update on their situation and what county officials are saying about it.
Carrie and Steve, fortunately, we were able to help this couple today find an appointment, but there are so many others like them. County officials acknowledge the problem, saying it will get better, and they're asking people for patience.
There have been arguments between the two of us on what to do. In fact, we were just going to go crash the gates.
When I first spoke with Michael and Susie Atkinson Monday morning, they expressed frustration and fear after having their second COVID-19 vaccine appointments canceled by UCSD 4 separate times with no updates since last week.
There's no place to email, and I haven't been able to find anything that would get me to a live voice.
These 77-year-olds had their first Moderna dose back on January 22nd at Petco Park, putting them well past the suggested 42-day mark to get their second dose. Following our conversation, I reached out to UCSD on their behalf. Less than an hour later, they received a call notifying them to head to Petco to get that second shot.
The update is I have spoken to somebody at UCSD, and we have appointments right now.
While progress was made in their case, the reality is there are so many others struggling to find that second dose.
No appointment, no rescheduling from bonds, no notices, no way to get a second shot.
News 8 has spoken with several people, mostly seniors. The problem comes down to supply and demand. Moderna is struggling to keep up with its delivery goals worldwide. Shipments were delayed due to weather and other supply chain issues. Pfizer is also falling behind. Not only that, but healthcare providers are under a federal government directive to use what they have instead of holding second doses. This morning, the county website listed 6 vaccination sites temporarily closed. Here's what County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher had to say about the issue.
It's a very challenging situation. Supplies don't show up. Vaccines don't always show up when we're told they're coming. We're going to do everything we can to work with our partners at the sites to make sure that everyone out there gets their second dose and gets the full protection from this.
Fletcher says UCSD, which runs the Petco Park site, now has enough vaccines to reschedule everyone, so you can wait for that. Other options include trying to find an appointment somewhere else that's not the place where you got your first vaccine. So you can look on the county website, or you can call pharmacies. In other words, be your own advocate, and if you can't, ask a family member for help.
You know, I understand their frustration. I was trying to get my parents the vaccine, and I mean, you get shut out, then you get frustrated, you start waking up at weird times thinking maybe they're going to release some different vaccines. So, you know, I feel their pain, but it is that situation where you just got to keep trying and trying and trying. And there's that, I'm noticing a lot of people getting the first vaccine, and then it's just as stressful trying to get the second one, and you feel like you're on this time crunch and you have to get it done by a certain deadline. So hopefully everybody gets taken care of. That's what we're seeing. Well, as you see in the video here, starting today, bars but nightclubs in Tijuana are reopening after being closed for a year because of COVID. As News 8's David Gottfredson reports, San Diego tourists visiting TJ noticed differences between the two cities.
The hygienic restrictions are a lot more strict, but the economic restrictions are a lot more lax here.
The restaurants in Tijuana have been open for some time, offering both indoor and outdoor dining, with COVID restrictions in place. Miriam Asadian from Pacific Beach notices people seem to be more cautious about COVID in Tijuana.
In order to enter a business in Tijuana, you have to get your temperature checked, you have to sanitize your hands, and you have to take a lot of hygienic precautions. And here on the street, everybody's wearing masks.
On Monday, bars and nightclubs in Tijuana were allowed to reopen at 50% capacity. The drinking age is 18 in Mexico, which has attracted American tourists here for decades.
I just make sure I bring my mask and follow the rules.
Anthony Amoroso lives in San Diego and crosses the border into TJ about once a month.
In San Diego, more stuff is closed. More of the restaurants only outside. You can only be outside. Some here you can be inside. You get a little bit more to do here than on the other side.
It's difficult to compare COVID positivity rates in Tijuana versus San Diego because testing protocols are different in the two border cities. But visitors say they are taking precautions.
I'm still keeping my distance. Plus, I'm always trying to be by myself most of the time. I think I still keep my distance as far as being with a lot of people because you never know who's sick.
In Tijuana, business owners do not get government assistance during the pandemic like they do here, so the reopening of bars and nightclubs after a year of being closed is good news.
Here on Revolution Ave, there's so many restaurants. You can go to Rosarito, you can go down to Puerto Nuevo, you can go to the Valle if you want to go wine tasting. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for Americans to come down, have a good time.
Tijuana has been lowered into what they call the yellow light tier, meaning restaurants can operate at 75% capacity now. And as we mentioned, the bars can operate at 50% capacity. Steve?
And David, that's definitely some good news for the businesses in Tijuana. But before San Diegans head over there, what kind of travel restrictions are there to get across the border?
Those travel restrictions technically are still in place. U.S. citizens are not supposed to walk or drive into Mexico for non-essential purposes, and tourism is considered non-essential. But I can tell you there were lots of tourists down there when that video was shot. And on your way back, you should not have a problem coming back into the United States because U.S. Customs officers will not stop U.S. citizens from returning to the United States.
All right, David. Interesting the way the two different countries are handling the situation, but hopefully all this will be behind us soon enough. Thank you.
Tonight, Tonight, county health officials are reporting 307 new coronavirus cases after yesterday's 5-month low of 187. This represents 3% of just under 10,000 tests. Confirmed COVID hospitalizations fell to 319 and the ICU count fell to 108. No new deaths are being reported today, but that's pretty typical for a Monday. The county's current case rate is 10.8. That number will be updated by the state tomorrow at noon.
Escondido police are highlighting its new de-escalation policy. Chief Ed Varso said he directed staff to review their policy following protests that were sparked in the wake of the death of George Floyd last year. He adds the new policy encourages using strategies most likely to lead to a peaceful resolution.
We strongly believe that this policy gives clear direction to our officers that when possible, we want them to slow things down, use sound strategies, and develop a plan that has the best odds of ending difficult and often emotionally charged incidents without the need for physical force.
And that new policy was crafted with the help of several different community organizations.